Canine dog blocks 6-year-old from hugging her dad. What he was hiding left the courtroom in silence. What happened next will leave you speechless. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from, because this story changes everything you think you know about a father's love. The courthouse hallway buzzed with nervous energy that Tuesday morning. Families clutched paperwork, lawyers whispered into phones, and somewhere in the maze of marble floors and echoing voices, 6-year-old Emma Chen bounced on her toes, her pigtails swaying with each excited hop. "Daddy's coming today," she whispered to her worn teddy bear, Mr. Buttons. Her small fingers traced the bear's missing eye, a casualty from one of those nights when screaming had echoed through the thin apartment walls. But Emma had chosen to forget those sounds. Today was different. Today was special. Her mother, Sarah, sat rigid on the wooden bench, her knuckles white as she gripped the custody papers. 2 years. 2 long years since Emma had last seen Marcus, her father. 2 years since the night Sarah had grabbed Emma from her bed and run to her sister's house with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a teddy bear missing an eye. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart?" Sarah murmured, her voice barely audible above the courthouse chatter. "If anything feels wrong..." "I know, Mommy." Emma's voice carried that peculiar mix of wisdom and innocence that comes from growing up too fast. "But Daddy said he's different now. He promised in his letters." The letters. Dozens of them, each one more apologetic than the last. Marcus had found God in prison, he claimed. He'd taken anger management classes. He'd changed, he swore on Emma's life. The court had believed him enough to grant supervised visitation. Sarah's stomach churned at the memory of the judge's words. "Children need their fathers, Mrs. Chen." Sergeant Kate Morrison stood near the security checkpoint, her canine partner, Rex, sitting alert beside her. Rex wasn't your typical courthouse security dog. His background was darker, more specialized. Before joining courthouse duty, he'd worked trafficking cases, child exploitation rings, places where evil wore human faces and hid behind smiles. Kate scratched behind Rex's ears, feeling the slight tension in his muscles. Something had him on edge today, though she couldn't pinpoint what. The German Shepherd's nose twitched, analyzing thousands of scents that painted invisible stories throughout the building. "Easy, boy," Kate whispered. "Just another custody day." But Rex's amber eyes remained fixed on something across the hall. His ears stood at attention, every nerve alert to a danger Kate couldn't see. Marcus Chen emerged from the elevator at exactly 2:15 p.m., 5 minutes early as promised. He looked different, cleaner, his hair neatly combed, wearing a button-down shirt instead of the stained tank tops Emma remembered. His smile seemed genuine as he spotted his daughter across the crowded hallway. "Emma!" His voice cracked with emotion that sounded real enough to fool anyone watching. Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Daddy!" She dropped Mr. Buttons and sprinted toward him, her small legs carrying her through the maze of people and benches. But she never made it. Rex exploded into motion, his powerful body launching forward with a speed that caught everyone off guard. The German Shepherd positioned himself directly between Emma and Marcus, his lips pulled back in a snarl that echoed off the marble walls. "Rex down!" Kate shouted, racing after her partner. She'd never seen him react like this during a routine visitation. "Rex, heel!" But Rex ignored every command, every whistle, every hand signal he had been trained to obey without question. Instead, he backed Emma away from Marcus, his body forming a living barrier between father and daughter. Emma stumbled backward, confusion replacing excitement in her wide brown eyes. "Why won't the doggy let me hug Daddy?" Marcus raised his hands, forcing his smile to remain steady, even as sweat beaded on his forehead. "It's okay, princess. Sometimes dogs get confused. Maybe I smell different because of the bus ride." Sarah rushed forward, her maternal instincts screaming louder than Rex's warning barks. Something was wrong. She'd seen that forced smile before, in the weeks leading up to that terrible night when she'd grabbed Emma and run. "Emma, come here," Sarah called, but her daughter stood frozen between the snarling dog and the father she'd missed for 2 years. Kate finally reached Rex, grabbing his collar, but the dog refused to budge. His training had kicked in, not courthouse security training, but something deeper, more primal. The scent Rex detected wasn't cologne or bus exhaust. It was the metallic tang of electronics, the sharp chemical smell of adhesive tape, and something else that made his hackles rise. "Sir, I need you to step back," Kate ordered, her hand moving instinctively toward her radio. 20 years of law enforcement had taught her to trust her partner's instincts. even when she couldn't understand them. Marcus's smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "Officer, I haven't seen my daughter in 2 years. Surely you can control your dog long enough for me to give her a hug." "The dog is controlled," Kate replied, studying Marcus's face. "He's doing exactly what he's trained to do." Emma took a small step toward her father, then stopped. Something tickled her nose, a familiar smell that brought back memories of late nights when Daddy worked in his special room, the one with locks on both sides. "Daddy, why do you smell like the Spark Room?" The courthouse seemed to hold its breath. Marcus's face went pale. "What did you say, Princess?" "You smell like fire and wires," Emma continued, her child's honesty cutting through the tension like a knife. "Like when you used to work in the room where I wasn't allowed." Kate's blood turned to ice. Fire and wires. Electronics. Her hand moved to her radio with practiced precision. "Control, I need backup at Corridor C. Possible electronic device detection." Marcus took a step forward, his mask finally slipping. "Emma, sweetheart, come to Daddy. The dog is just confused." But Rex pressed closer to Emma, his growl deepening to a sound that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and protective. The German Shepherd had smelled this scent before, in raids on houses where children's innocence was bought and sold, where fathers weren't protectors but predators. "Sir, I need you to remain where you are," Kate commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen too much evil to ignore the warning signs. Sarah grabbed Emma's hand, pulling her daughter behind the human and canine barrier that Rex had formed. "Emma, stay with me." "But Mommy, I want to hug Daddy," Emma protested, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. "I missed him so much." The crowd in the courthouse had begun to notice the commotion. Lawyers paused their conversations, other families stopped their nervous pacing, and somewhere in the building, a judge who had been reviewing case files was alerted to a situation developing in Corridor C. Marcus's eyes darted toward the exit, then back to Emma, calculating distances and opportunities. "This is ridiculous. I'm her father. I have court-ordered visitation rights." "And I have a dog trained to detect threats to children," Kate replied, backup officers now approaching from both ends of the corridor. "Rex doesn't react like this unless there's a reason." Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand, the gesture so innocent it broke Sarah's heart. "Daddy, are you still doing the picture work? The kind that made Mommy cry?" Marcus froze. The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire no one wanted to acknowledge. Picture work. Sarah's face went white as memories flooded back. The locked room, the computer equipment, the nights when Marcus thought she was asleep, but she'd heard the muffled sounds through thin walls. Rex sensed the shift in the air, the moment when secrets began to crack open like eggs hitting pavement. His body remained tense, ready, protecting the small girl who smelled like strawberry shampoo and innocence from the man who carried the electronic signature of predation. "Sir, I'm going to need you to slowly reach into your pockets and place any electronic devices on the ground," Kate ordered, more backup officers now surrounding the scene. Marcus's laugh sounded forced, desperate. "This is insane. I don't have any—" "Daddy's lying," Emma said quietly, the words cutting through his protest like a scalpel. "He always has the little boxes that beep. He told me they were for work, but work doesn't make little girls cry on the computer screen." The courthouse corridor fell silent, except for Rex's steady panting and the sound of Sarah's sharp intake of breath. Emma had just spoken a truth that adults had been too afraid or too blind to see. Kate keyed her radio again. "Control, I need Detective Walsh down here immediately. We have a potential 459 situation. Code 459. Child endangerment with electronic evidence." Marcus's mask finally shattered completely. The loving father disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You don't understand what you're interfering with, officer. This is bigger than one family court case." "Daddy, you're scaring me," Emma whispered, pressing closer to Sarah's legs. But Rex stepped forward, placing himself between Emma and the man who'd pretended to love her. The German Shepherd's training from trafficking cases had taught him that monsters rarely looked like monsters. They looked like fathers, like uncles, like family friends who brought presents and made promises they never intended to keep. Detective Maria Walsh arrived at a run, her 25 years of experience reading situations in seconds. She took one look at Rex's posture, at Marcus's defensive stance, at Emma's tear-streaked face, and began the process that would unravel threads connecting far beyond this courthouse corridor. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back, Detective Walsh said, her voice calm but unyielding. This is harassment, Marcus protested, but his hands were already moving behind him, muscle memory from previous arrests overriding his conscious control. As Detective Walsh's hands moved over Marcus's torso during a standard pat-down, her fingers encountered something that made Rex's earlier behavior suddenly, terrifyingly clear. Taped to Marcus's waist, hidden beneath his clean shirt and reformed appearance, was a small rectangular device no bigger than a smartphone. Wires ran from it to a tiny microphone positioned near his collar, and a red light blinked steadily, indicating active recording. What do we have here? Detective Walsh carefully removed the device, her expression growing darker as she examined it. The courthouse corridor, which had been buzzing with nervous energy just minutes before, now stood in complete silence. Even the lawyers had stopped their whispered conversations, sensing that something far more sinister than a simple custody dispute was unfolding before their eyes. Emma looked up at Rex, who had finally relaxed his aggressive stance but remained protectively close. "Good doggy," she whispered, reaching out to touch his fur. "You knew Daddy was still doing bad things, didn't you?" Rex's tail moved slightly, not a wag, but an acknowledgement. In the language of German shepherds trained to detect human evil, he'd done his job. The small girl who smelled like innocence was safe, at least for now. But Detective Walsh's examination of the recording device revealed something that made her blood run cold. The device wasn't just recording, it was transmitting. Somewhere, someone else had been listening to every word of Emma's reunion with her father, every innocent statement, every expression of trust and love. Marcus Chen, the reformed father seeking custody of his daughter, had been wearing a wire. The question that would keep Detective Walsh awake for the next several nights was simple but terrifying. Who had been on the other end of that transmission? Sarah held Emma close, finally understanding why Rex had risked his training, his career, his perfect record of obedience to stand between her daughter and the man she'd once loved. The German shepherd had smelled something human noses couldn't detect, the scent of electronics mixed with predation, the invisible signature of evil that wore a father's face. As backup officers led Marcus away, Detective Walsh pocketed the recording device, knowing it would be the first thread in unraveling something much larger than anyone in that courthouse corridor could possibly imagine. Emma picked up Mr. Buttons from where she'd dropped him in her excitement to see her father. The teddy bear's missing eye seemed to wink at her as she pressed it close to her chest. Sometimes, she was learning, the things that looked broken were the ones that saw the truth most clearly. Rex sat beside Kate, his duty complete but his instincts still alert. In his years of training, he'd learned that protecting innocence meant more than following commands. Sometimes it meant knowing when to break every rule you had ever been taught, when to trust your nose over human authority, when to stand between good and evil, even if nobody understood why. The courthouse would return to its normal bustling energy within minutes. Other families would continue their custody battles, lawyers would resume their whispered strategies, and judges would make decisions about children's futures. But for Detective Walsh, for Kate and Rex, for Sarah and Emma, this Tuesday afternoon had become the beginning of something that would test every assumption they had ever held about trust, family, and the sometimes thin line between love and predation. Judge Patricia Hendricks had been reviewing case files in her chambers when her bailiff knocked urgently on her door. 28 years on the bench had taught her to recognize the difference between routine courthouse drama and something genuinely dangerous. The tension in her bailiff's voice told her this was the latter. "Your Honor, we have a situation in Corridor C. Detective Walsh is requesting your immediate presence." Judge Hendricks set down her reading glasses and followed her bailiff through the maze of corridors that connected her chambers to the main courthouse areas. She'd overseen thousands of custody cases, watched families torn apart and rebuilt, witnessed the full spectrum of human nature under the stress of legal proceedings. But nothing had prepared her for the scene that greeted her in Corridor C. Marcus Chen stood in handcuffs, flanked by two officers, while Detective Walsh examined what appeared to be sophisticated recording equipment. A German shepherd sat protectively near a small girl who clutched a one-eyed teddy bear, and a woman who could only be the child's mother looked as though she might collapse at any moment. "Detective Walsh, what exactly is happening here?" Judge Hendricks asked, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to controlling chaotic situations. "Your Honor, Mr. Chen was found to be wearing concealed recording equipment during a court-ordered visitation with his daughter. The device was actively transmitting to an unknown location. Detective Walsh held up the small black box, its red light still blinking ominously. My canine partner detected the electronics and prevented contact between Mr. Chen and the child. Judge Hendricks studied Marcus's face, searching for the reformed man she'd seen in her courtroom just 3 months earlier. During his custody hearing, he'd been articulate, remorseful, seemingly genuine in his desire to rebuild his relationship with his daughter. His lawyer had presented character witnesses, completion certificates from anger management courses, even letters from a prison chaplain attesting to his spiritual transformation. "Mr. Chen, do you have an explanation for this equipment?" Judge Hendricks asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer wouldn't satisfy her. Marcus lifted his chin, attempting to regain some dignity despite his circumstances. "Your Honor, I was documenting our reunion for my own records. I wanted to remember every moment with Emma after being separated for so long." "Daddy, you're lying again," Emma said quietly, her voice cutting through the adult conversation like a bell in the silence. "You used to lie about the picture work, too." Detective Walsh knelt down to Emma's level, her voice gentle but urgent. "Emma, can you tell me about the picture work?" Emma looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly despite her own terror. "Daddy had a special room with 2 locks. He said it was for work, but I heard crying through the door sometimes. Little girl crying, like me when I have bad dreams." Sarah's face went ashen. "Emma, you never told me about hearing—" "I tried to tell you, Mommy, but you were always crying too, and Daddy said if I talked about work stuff, my toys would disappear forever." Emma hugged Mr. Buttons tighter. "He said work was a secret between grown-ups." Judge Hendricks felt her stomach turn. In nearly 3 decades of family law, she'd developed an instinct for recognizing the signs of abuse, manipulation, and worse. Emma's words painted a picture that made the recording device seem like just the tip of a much darker iceberg. Detective Walsh stood up, her expression grim. "Your Honor, I'm going to need to examine this device more thoroughly. The transmission capabilities suggest this might be part of a larger operation." "Operation?" Sarah whispered, still holding Emma close. "What kind of operation?" Before anyone could answer, Judge Hendricks's bailiff approached with an urgency that made everyone tense. "Your Honor, we have another problem. There's a man in the lobby asking about the Chen custody case. He claims to be a social worker, but his credentials don't check out." Detective Walsh's radio crackled to life. "Detective Walsh, we have eyes on your suspect in the main lobby. Individual matches description of someone who has been loitering near family court proceedings for the past 3 weeks." Rex suddenly stood at attention, his ears perked and his body rigid. The German Shepherd had caught another scent, one that made his training kick into high alert. Kate noticed immediately. "Rex, what is it, boy?" Kate asked, but she already knew. Her partner had detected something else, someone else who carried the electronic signature of predation. Emma looked around nervously. "The smell is back," she whispered to her mother, "like Daddy's room, but different." Detective Walsh spoke into her radio. "Bring the subject up to Corridor C. I want Rex to get a scent." Within minutes, courthouse security escorted a middle-aged man in a cheap suit up the corridor. He carried a briefcase and wore an expression of professional concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. As soon as he came 20 feet of their group, Rex began to growl low in throat. "I'm Dr. Kevin Marsh from Child Protective Services," the man announced, though he kept his distance from the snarling German Shepherd. "I'm here to assess the safety of the child in this situation." Detective Walsh examined his identification, then looked at Judge Hendricks. "Your Honor, CPS has no record of Dr. Marsh, and Rex is indicating the presence of electronic surveillance equipment."
Dr. Marsh's professional facade began to crack. "There must be some mistake. I was called in specifically for this case." "Called in by whom?" Judge Hendricks demanded.
The question hung in the air unanswered as Detective Walsh approached Dr. Marsh with the same careful movements she'd used with Marcus. "Sir, I'm going to need you to empty your pockets and open your briefcase." "This is highly irregular," Dr. Marsh protested, but his hands were already shaking as he set down his briefcase. When Detective Walsh opened the case, the contents made everyone in the corridor step back in horror. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, showing children in various courthouse settings. Children hugging their parents during visitation, children crying during custody disputes, children being comforted by lawyers and social workers. But these weren't random photographs. Each image was labeled with detailed notes. Age 6, emotionally vulnerable, limited supervision. Age 8, trusts authority figures easily. Age 5, frequently left alone during proceedings. Emma's photograph was prominently displayed in the center of the collection, with extensive notes about her custody case, her mother's work schedule, even details about which days she attended school. Sarah's knees buckled. Judge Hendricks caught her arm, steadying her as the full scope of what they'd uncovered began to reveal itself. "Your Honor," Detective Walsh said, her voice tight with controlled anger, "we're not dealing with a simple custody violation. This appears to be a coordinated effort to identify and target vulnerable children through the family court system." Rex had positioned himself between Dr. Marsh and Emma, his training from trafficking cases recognizing the patterns of predators who used official positions to access victims. Marcus, still in handcuffs, watched the scene unfold with an expression that shifted between fear and resignation. "You don't understand," he said finally. "This is bigger than you think. They have people everywhere." "Who is they?" Detective Walsh demanded. "I can't. If I talk, Emma won't be safe. None of the kids will be safe." Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, is Daddy trying to protect me now, or is he still lying?" The question came from such an innocent place, but it captured the horrifying complexity of their situation. Marcus had been part of something evil, yet now he seemed genuinely terrified for his daughter's safety. Judge Hendricks made a decision that would haunt her for months to come. Clear the courthouse, lock down all entrances. No one gets in or out until we understand exactly what we're dealing with. As courthouse security began the lockdown procedures, Detective Walsh examined the recording device more closely. The technology was sophisticated, expensive, not something a reformed ex-convict could easily acquire. The transmission range suggested receivers within a several-mile radius, and the quality indicated professional-grade surveillance equipment. "Mr. Chen," Judge Hendricks said, her voice carrying both authority and unexpected compassion, "if you truly want to protect your daughter, now is the time to tell us everything." Marcus looked at Emma, who was still clutching her one-eyed teddy bear. For the first time since his arrest, his mask of defiance completely crumbled. "They recruited me in prison, said I could see Emma again if I helped them identify vulnerable kids in the system. All I had to do was wear the wire during visitations, record conversations, note which children seemed most isolated or traumatized." Sarah felt sick. "You were shopping our daughter to predators?" "No." Marcus's denial came out as a strangled cry. "I was supposed to just gather information. They said it was for research, for helping kids in the system. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know what they really wanted until last week." "What happened last week?" Detective Walsh asked. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. "They showed me the tapes, hours and hours of recordings from other fathers, other custody case. They had children's voices, their fears, their secrets, and they were selling access to people who—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Emma looked up at Rex, who had relaxed slightly but remained alert. "The doggy knew Daddy was in trouble too, didn't he?" Kate nodded, understanding her partner's behavior more clearly now. Rex hadn't just detected recording equipment, he'd sensed the fear, the conflict, the danger that surrounded Marcus like an invisible cloud. Dr. Marsh, meanwhile, had been silently calculating his options. As Detective Walsh continued to examine his briefcase, he made a decision that would change everything. In one swift movement, he lunged toward Emma, clearly intending to grab her as some sort of leverage. But Rex was faster. The German Shepherd launched himself between Dr. Marsh and Emma with a force that sent the fake social worker sprawling across the marble floor. Rex's jaws closed around Dr. Marsh's wrist, not hard enough to cause permanent damage, but with enough pressure to ensure he wasn't going anywhere. "Good boy, Rex," Kate said, though her heart was pounding. Her partner had just prevented what could have been a kidnapping attempt in the middle of a courthouse. As Dr. Marsh writhed on the floor, something fell from his jacket pocket, a small tablet computer that had been recording everything. Detective Walsh carefully retrieved it, noting that, like Marcus's device, it had been actively transmitting. "How many people are watching this?" Judge Hendricks asked, the question directed at both men. Marcus answered first. "I don't know. They used code names, encrypted messages, but there are others like me, fathers, mothers, even some lawyers who've been compromised." The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear. and it was far worse than anyone had imagined. The family court system, designed to protect children and families, had been infiltrated by predators who used custody disputes and visitation rights to identify and access vulnerable victims. Emma, oblivious to the full horror of what she'd helped uncover, petted Rex gently. "Thank you for keeping me safe," she whispered to the German Shepherd. "I wish all the kids had a doggy like you." Her innocent words carried a weight that made every adult in the corridor realize they were standing at the center of something that reached far beyond this courthouse, beyond this city, possibly beyond this state. Detective Walsh began making calls that would bring federal agents, specialized task forces, and resources that local law enforcement rarely needed. But even as she coordinated the response, she knew that Emma's simple question would echo in her mind for years to come. How many other children were out there without a Rex to protect them? What Emma whispered to Rex next would change the entire direction of the investigation, and you won't believe what she remembered about her father's work friends. Emma knelt beside Rex, her small hand gently stroking the German Shepherd's fur as courthouse security continued their lockdown procedures around them. The 6-year-old seemed oddly calm, considering the chaos that had erupted in the past hour, as if part of her had always known this day would come. "Rex," she whispered, her voice so quiet that Kate had to lean closer to hear, "I want to tell you a secret, but I'm scared the bad men might be listening." Detective Walsh immediately understood the child's fear. If Marcus and Dr. Marsh were part of a larger network, there was no telling how far their surveillance reached, or who else might be involved. She made a quick decision that would prove crucial to unraveling the entire conspiracy. "Emma, how would you like to take Rex to a special room where no one else can hear you?" Detective Walsh asked gently. "Just you, me, your mom, and Rex." Judge Hendricks nodded approvingly. "Use conference room B, it's soundproof, and swept for electronic devices daily." As they made their way to the secure conference room, Emma kept one hand on Rex's collar and held Mr. Buttons tight against her chest with the other. Sarah walked beside them, her face pale but determined. The mother who had once fled in the middle of the night to protect her daughter was now ready to face whatever truths Emma had been carrying alone. The conference room was sterile and windowless, designed for sensitive legal discussions. Kate positioned Rex near Emma's chair, and the German Shepherd immediately settled into his protective stance, his amber eyes never leaving the little girl's face. "Emma," Detective Walsh began, her voice soft but encouraging. "You mentioned work friends. Can you tell us about them?" Emma looked at her mother, then at Rex, as if drawing strength from both. "Daddy had friends who came to our old house sometimes. They brought big boxes with computers and cameras inside. They called it the network." Sarah's breath caught. "Emma, you never told me about visitors. When did they come?" "At night, when you were working late at the hospital," Emma replied, her innocence making the revelation even more chilling. "Daddy said they were helping him with a special job, and I had to stay in my room with the door locked. But sometimes I heard them talking about other kids." Detective Walsh leaned forward carefully. "What did they say about other kids?" Emma's voice became even smaller. "They had pictures on their computers, lots and lots of pictures, and they talked about which kids were sad, which ones didn't have daddies or mommies who paid attention. They said sad kids were easier to help." The word help, coming from Emma's innocent lips, sent chills down every adult's spine. Rex seemed to sense the change in the room's emotional temperature and moved closer to Emma's chair. "Did you ever see these friends?" Kate asked. Emma nodded. "One time I got thirsty and came downstairs. There was a lady with short hair who looked like a teacher, and a man with a beard who smelled like cigarettes. The teacher lady saw me and smiled, but her smile was scary, like when people pretend to be nice but aren't really." Sarah gripped to the edge of the table. "Emma, why didn't you tell me about this?" "I tried, Mommy, but you were always so tired from work, and Daddy said if I talked about his friends, something bad would happen to you." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "He said his friends had helped other kids whose mommies got hurt because they talked too much." Detective Walsh felt her stomach turn. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated, designed to isolate Emma and ensure her silence through fear for her mother's safety. These weren't amateur predators. They were organized, experienced, and utterly ruthless. "Emma, you're being so brave," Detective Walsh said. "Is there anything else you remember about Daddy's work or his friends?" Emma looked at Rex, who had been listening with the focused attention of a dog trained to detect human suffering. "They had a special computer that made maps. Red dots for kids they were watching, green dots for kids they were helping. The mapping system revelation hit Detective Walsh like a physical blow. A coordinated network tracking vulnerable children across geographic areas suggested an operation far more extensive than anything she'd encountered in her 15 years of law enforcement. "Did you ever see your picture on their maps?" Detective Walsh asked gently. Emma shook her head. "No, but I saw other pictures. Kids from my school, kids from the park where Mommy used to take me, and they had files with numbers instead of names." Sarah buried her face in her hands. "Oh God, Emma, I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening." "It's not your fault, Mommy," Emma said with the wisdom of a child forced to grow up too quickly. "Daddy was good at hiding things. He told me that's what made him special at his job." Detective Walsh's radio crackled, interrupting the devastating testimony. "Detective Walsh, we need you back in Corridor C immediately. We have developments." As they prepared to leave the conference room, Emma tugged on Detective Walsh's sleeve. "The teacher lady and the cigarette man, they might still be around. Daddy said they never went far from their work." The implication was terrifying. If Marcus's accomplices were still in the area, still actively hunting vulnerable children, then Emma's brave testimony had just provided law enforcement with their first real leads in what was clearly a massive investigation. Back in Corridor C, the scene had transformed into a command center. Federal agents had arrived, computer specialists were analyzing the seized devices, and a specialized task force was coordinating with multiple agencies. But what had prompted the urgent recall became clear the moment Detective Walsh saw the expression on Agent Sarah Chen's face. "Detective Walsh, we've cracked the encryption on both devices," Agent Chen announced. "What we found is beyond anything we imagined." The federal agent led them to a secure laptop that displayed what looked like a sophisticated database. Hundreds of profiles filled the screen. Children's faces, ages, family situations, psychological assessments, and location data. The scope was breathtaking and horrifying. "This network has been operational for at least 3 years," Agent Chen explained. "They've identified over 500 children across 7 states, all accessed through family court systems, social services, or educational institutions." Sarah felt the room spin around her. 500 children? "The good news is that we now have their entire database," Agent Chen continued. "Every child they have targeted, every participant in their network, every transaction they've recorded." Emma looked up at the adults surrounding her, processing information that no 6-year-old should ever have to understand. "Are all those kids going to be safe now?" Agent Chen knelt down to Emma's level. "Because of your bravery in telling us about your daddy's work friends, we're going to be able to help all of them." But as investigators delved deeper into the database, they discovered something that made Emma's earlier testimony even more crucial. The network hadn't just been gathering information. They'd been actively facilitating access between predators and children, using legitimate institutions as cover for their operations. "Detective Walsh," Agent Chen called urgently, "you need to see this." On the laptop screen was a calendar application showing scheduled appointments between various adults and children, coordinated through what appeared to be legitimate activities, tutoring sessions, mentoring programs, even therapeutic services. They were using the system itself, Detective Walsh realized. Family court visitations, supervised activities, legitimate social services, all of it was cover for predatory access. Marcus, who had been silent since his earlier confessions, suddenly spoke up. "That's why they wanted me to get custody. Not just to record Emma, but to have legitimate access to her through court-ordered visitation." The revelation hit everyone like a cold wave. The custody case hadn't been about a father wanting to reconnect with his daughter. It had been about a predatory network trying to gain legal access to a vulnerable child. Emma, still holding Mr. Buttons, looked around at all the serious adult faces. "Daddy, were you ever going to really love me again, or was it always about the work?" Marcus's composure finally broke completely. "Emma, princess, I convinced myself that I could protect you, that I could be part of their system without letting them hurt you. But I was wrong. I was so wrong." "The teacher lady told you I was special, didn't she?" Emma asked with devastating clarity. "She said I was good at keeping secrets, and that made me perfect for helping." Marcus nodded miserably. "She said you showed signs of being easily manipulated, that your trauma from our family situation made you an ideal candidate for their programs. Sarah stood up abruptly, rage and protective instinct overriding her shock. You were going to let them experiment on our daughter's trauma? I thought I could control it, Marcus whispered. I thought I could take their money, give them some information, but keep Emma safe. I didn't realize they were already planning to take her, regardless of what I did. Agent Chen interrupted the family confrontation with news that sent another chill through the room. Detective Walsh, we've identified the woman Emma described. Dr. Patricia Hawkins, former child psychologist, lost her license 3 years ago for unethical research practices involving traumatized children. And the man with the beard? Detective Walsh asked. Thomas Reed, registered sex offender, supposedly under supervision, except his parole officer hasn't seen him in 6 months. Emma looked up at Rex, who had remained steadily alert throughout the revelations. Rex, do you think the teacher lady and cigarette man are still trying to hurt kids? Before anyone could answer, Agent Chen's phone rang. The conversation was brief but intense, and when she hung up, her expression was grim. We have a problem, Agent Chen announced. Dr. Hawkins and Reed were spotted 3 hours ago at Jefferson Elementary School. They identified themselves as researchers conducting a study on children from broken homes. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Sarah's sharp intake of breath. Jefferson Elementary was Emma's school. They're not just running, Detective Walsh realized. They're hunting. Emma tugged on Kate's uniform sleeve. Officer Kate, Rex needs to go to my school. There are kids there who don't have anyone to protect them, just like I didn't have anyone before Rex found me. The 6-year-old's words galvanized everyone in the room. Within minutes, law enforcement vehicles were racing toward Jefferson Elementary, led by Kate and Rex, with Emma's testimony providing crucial details about the predator's methods and preferences. As their convoy sped through the city streets, Emma held Rex's collar from the back seat, her voice barely audible over the sirens. Rex, promise me we'll get there in time. Promise me the teacher lady won't hurt any of my friends. Rex looked back at her, with those amber eyes that had seen too much human evil, and somehow, Emma understood that the German Shepherd was making a promise he intended to keep, no matter what it cost him. What they found at Jefferson Elementary would test that promise in ways none of them could have imagined, and Emma's final secret would reveal the true scope of the horror they were racing to stop. Jefferson Elementary School stood quiet in the late afternoon sun, its red brick facade and cheerful playground giving no hint of the predators who had infiltrated its walls just hours earlier. As the convoy of law enforcement vehicles pulled into the circular drive, Rex immediately went into high alert, his body tense and his nose working overtime to process the scents that told stories human noses couldn't detect. Principal Margaret Foster met them at the main entrance, her face pale with worry. Officers, I don't understand what's happening. Dr. Hawkins and Mr. Reed presented excellent credentials. They said they were conducting research approved by the district office. Detective Walsh showed her badge, while Agent Chen began coordinating with the tactical team that had followed their convoy. Mrs. Foster, we need to know exactly where these individuals are right now, and which children they've had access to. They're in the counseling center with a group of students from our support program, Principal Foster replied, then stopped as the full implication hit her. Oh my God. Those are our most vulnerable kids, children from foster care, kids dealing with family trauma, recent immigrants who don't speak much English. Emma gripped Rex's collar tighter. That's exactly who they look for, she said quietly. Kids who won't be believed, kids who don't have grown-ups who listen to them. Kate felt Rex's muscles coil like springs under his fur. Her partner had detected the same electronic signatures that had triggered his response at the courthouse, but now the scent was stronger, more concentrated. Rex is indicating multiple electronic devices in the building. Agent Chen spoke into her radio. All units, we have confirmation of suspects in the counseling center. Approach with extreme caution. Children are present. As they moved through the school's familiar hallways, Emma's memories began flooding back. The teacher lady always said kids like us were special because we understood secrets. She said normal kids couldn't handle the important work she was doing. Sarah held her daughter's hand tightly. What kind of work did she say she was doing? She called it emotional research, Emma replied, her voice growing smaller as they approached the counseling center. She said she was helping kids learn to trust grown-ups again by testing how much they could handle. The phrase testing how much they could handle sent chills through every adult present. As they reached the corridor leading to the counseling center, Rex suddenly stopped, his ears perked and his body rigid with tension. From behind the closed door of the counseling center came the sound of children's voices, some crying, some protesting, and one voice that made Emma freeze in recognition. "I know that crying," Emma whispered. "That's Lily Martinez from my class. She lives with her grandma because her mommy got sick." Detective Walsh motioned for everyone to stop while she listened at the door. Through the thin walls, they could hear Dr. Patricia Hawkins's voice, smooth and manipulative, coaxing responses from frightened children. "Now, children, this is a special game where we test how good you are at keeping grown-up secrets. Some of you might feel scared, but that just means you're learning to be brave." Agent Chen's jaw tightened. That's psychological grooming in real time. The sound of equipment being moved around came through the door, followed by Thomas Reed's gravelly voice. "The cameras are recording perfectly. This session should give us enough baseline data to determine which subjects show the most promise." Emma tugged on Detective Walsh's sleeve urgently. "They're making movies of the kids. That's what Daddy meant when he said his friends helped kids. They made them into movie stars, but not the good kind." Rex began to whine low in his throat, a sound Kate had never heard from him before. Her partner wasn't just detecting electronic equipment anymore. He was sensing genuine distress from the children inside that room. "We can't wait any longer," Detective Walsh decided. "Those children are being traumatized right now." But before they could move, Emma grabbed Kate's arm with surprising strength. "Wait, I have to tell you something important. The teacher lady has a special thing she does when she gets scared. She hurts the kids to make the police go away." Agent Chen felt her blood turn to ice. "What do you mean, Emma?" "When we lived in the old house, the police came once because neighbors heard crying. The teacher lady grabbed me and put something sharp against my neck. She told the police that if they came closer, she would hurt me worse. They went away." The revelation changed everything. Dr. Hawkins wasn't just a predator. She was willing to use children as human shields, and she had a history of escalating to violence when cornered. Detective Walsh spoke quietly into her radio. "All units, be advised. Suspect has a history of using children as hostages. We need crisis negotiation backup immediately." But Rex had other ideas. The German Shepherd had been trained for situations exactly like this, scenarios where children were in immediate danger and traditional law enforcement tactics might result in harm to innocents. His specialized training from trafficking cases had taught him to differentiate between rescue operations and situations that required a more subtle approach. Kate looked down at her partner, understanding his body language after years of working together. "Rex wants to go in first. He's trained for child extraction in hostile situations." "Absolutely not," Agent Chen protested. "We can't risk—" "Officer Kate," Emma interrupted, "Rex isn't just a police dog. He's a kid-protecting dog. He knows how to be quiet and careful." Through the door, the voices inside had changed tone. Dr. Hawkins sounded agitated, and Thomas Reed was moving equipment more frantically. They had obviously realized that their time was running out. "Something's wrong in there," Principal Foster whispered. "I can hear Lily crying harder now." Emma made a decision that would haunt and inspire everyone present for years to come. "I have to go in with Rex. The teacher lady knows me, and she might not hurt the other kids if she thinks she can have me instead." "Absolutely not," Sarah said immediately. "Emma, you are not going anywhere near those people." "Mommy, the other kids don't know the teacher lady's tricks like I do. They don't know how to make themselves small and quiet when she gets angry. I do." Agent Chen knelt down to Emma's level. "Emma, what you're suggesting is incredibly brave, but we can't let you put yourself in danger." "But I'm not in danger if Rex is with me," Emma replied with the kind of logic that only makes sense when viewed through a child's perspective. "Rex already saved me once. He can save me and the other kids too." Before anyone could stop her, Emma had moved to the door and knocked gently. "Dr. Hawkins? It's Emma. I came to join your special research project." The room inside went completely silent. "Emma?" Dr. Hawkins' voice came through the door, filled with surprise and something that might have been relief. "What are you doing here, sweetheart?" "My daddy said you wanted to see me. He said I was good at your games and that you missed working with me." Kate positioned Rex behind Emma, ready to spring into action the moment the door opened. The German Shepherd understood his role, protect Emma while creating an opportunity for the other children to escape. The sound of locks being disengaged came from inside the room, followed by Dr. Hawkins' artificially sweet voice. "Well, come in then, dear. We're just finishing up with some new friends of yours." The door opened to reveal a scene that would be burned into everyone's memory forever. 6 children, all between the ages of 5 and 8, sat in a circle on the floor. Some were crying silently, others stared with the blank expressions of kids who had learned that resistance only made things worse. Video cameras on tripods surrounded them, their red recording lights blinking ominously. Dr. Patricia Hawkins looked exactly as Emma had described, a woman who appeared professional and trustworthy until you looked closely at her eyes. Those eyes held a coldness that made Rex's hackles rise immediately. Thomas Reed stood behind the cameras, his beard unkempt and his clothes carrying the stale smell of cigarettes and something else that Rex's training had taught him to associate with predatory behavior. "Emma!" Lily Martinez cried out, tears streaming down her face. "They said we were going to play games, but these aren't fun games." Emma stepped into the room with Rex at her side, and Dr. Hawkins immediately noticed the German Shepherd. "I don't remember you having a dog, Emma." "Rex is new," Emma replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "He helps me feel brave when grown-ups want me to do things I don't like." Dr. Hawkins's professional mask flickered. "Well, Rex will need to wait outside. This is a private research session." "Rex doesn't like to leave me alone with strangers," Emma said, moving closer to the circle of children, "especially strangers who make other kids cry." Thomas Reed had been watching the interaction while continuing to operate his cameras, but now he looked up with alarm. "Patricia, something's wrong. The kid's too calm, too prepared, and that dog—" Rex had been silently assessing the room, identifying threats and calculating distances. His training kicked in as he detected not just the electronic equipment, but also the chemical signatures of fear and trauma emanating from the 6 children on the floor. "Lily," Emma said quietly, never taking her eyes off Dr. Hawkins. "Remember the fire drill we practiced last week? It's time to do that now." Lily understood immediately. She grabbed the hand of the child next to her and started moving toward the door, but Thomas Reed moved to block their path. That's when Rex struck. The German Shepherd launched himself at Thomas Reed with the full force of his training and protective instincts. The bearded man went down hard, his equipment scattering across the floor as cameras toppled and recording devices smashed against the walls. "Run!" Emma shouted to the other children. "Get out now!" Dr. Hawkins lunged for Emma, but the 6-year-old had learned more from her father's work friends than anyone realized. She dropped low and rolled away, a movement that put her directly between Dr. Hawkins and the escaping children. "You little brat," Dr. Hawkins snarled, her professional facade completely gone now. "Do you have any idea how much money you just cost us?" But Rex had finished with Thomas Reed, who was now unconscious on the floor, and turned his attention to Dr. Hawkins. The woman found herself facing an 80-pound German Shepherd, whose training had prepared him for exactly this scenario. Detective Walsh, Agent Chen, and Kate burst through the door, just as the last of the 6 children escaped into the hallway. The room was in chaos, broken equipment everywhere, Thomas Reed groaning on the floor with Rex standing over him, and Dr. Hawkins backed against the wall, with Emma safely behind the protective barrier of law enforcement officers. "It's over," Agent Chen announced, her weapon drawn and pointed at Dr. Hawkins. But Dr. Hawkins smiled with the confidence of someone who had prepared for this moment. "You think this is over? You have no idea how deep this goes." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device that made Rex immediately go back into high alert. "This is a dead man's switch. If I let go, every child in our database gets moved to secure locations within the hour, locations you'll never find." Emma looked up at the adults around her, then at Rex, who was still standing protectively near Thomas Reed, but watching Dr. Hawkins with intense focus. "She's lying," Emma said quietly. "The teacher lady always lies when she gets scared. She told my daddy that the police would never find all the kids, but that was just to make him more scared, so he would do what she wanted." Dr. Hawkins's confident expression flickered. "You don't understand the scope of what you're interfering with, little girl." "I understand that you're mean to kids and you pretend it's for research," Emma replied. "And I understand that Rex is a lot smarter than you think he is." As if responding to his name, Rex moved with the lightning-fast precision that had made him legendary among K9 units. He knocked the device from Dr. Hawkins's hand before she could react, and it skittered across the floor where Agent Chen quickly secured it. No dead man's switch, Agent Chen confirmed after examining the device. Just a recording device, probably meant to capture audio of any police negotiations for future training purposes. Dr. Hawkins was handcuffed and read her rights while Thomas Reed was loaded onto a stretcher, still unconscious from his encounter with Rex. As they were led away, Emma noticed something that made her call out to Detective Walsh. "Detective Walsh, look in the teacher lady's bag. She always carries a special computer that has all the important stuff on it." Sure enough, Dr. Hawkins's briefcase contained a laptop computer that would prove to be the missing piece of the puzzle. The hard drive contained not just the database of targeted children, but also financial records, communication logs, and most importantly, a complete roster of everyone involved in the network. As paramedics checked the 6 rescued children for any signs of physical harm, Emma sat with Rex in the school hallway. "Rex, do you think all the kids are going to be okay now?" Kate knelt beside them. "Because of you and Rex, Emma, all those kids are safe. And because of what you told us, we're going to be able to find every other child who might be in danger." But Emma's expression remained serious. "Kate, there's one more thing I have to tell you. Something I remembered when I saw the teacher lady's special computer." Agent Chen joined them, sensing that Emma's final revelation might be the most important of all. "The teacher lady showed me her computer once, when Daddy wasn't looking. She said I was smart enough to understand the big picture." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. There were names on her list that weren't kids. They were grown-ups who work with kids. Teachers, doctors, people who are supposed to protect children. The implication hit everyone like a thunderbolt. The network hadn't just been targeting vulnerable children. They had been recruiting people in positions of trust to help them identify and access victims. What Emma revealed about the names on that computer would expose a conspiracy that reached into schools, hospitals, and child services across multiple states. But first, they had to decode the encrypted files that would change everything they thought they knew about child protection. Comment below if you think Emma is the bravest 6-year-old you've ever heard of, and tell us what you would have done in her situation. 3 weeks later, in a secure federal facility designed for processing the most sensitive cybercrime evidence, Agent Sarah Chen stared at computer screens that displayed the contents of Dr. Patricia Hawkins's encrypted hard drive. What they had uncovered made the original courthouse incident seem like just the tip of an iceberg that extended far deeper than anyone had imagined. Emma sat in a comfortable chair nearby, clutching Mr. Buttons, while Rex lay protectively at her feet. The 6-year-old had become an invaluable consultant in the investigation, her innocent observations often providing the key to understanding the predator's methods and motivations. "Emma," Agent Chen said gently, "you mentioned that Dr. Hawkins showed you names of grown-ups on her computer. Can you help us understand what she meant when she talked about the big picture?" Emma looked up from the coloring book she'd been working on, a therapeutic tool recommended by the FBI's child psychology specialists. She said kids can't protect themselves, so the smart thing to do was to get the protector grown-ups to help instead of fighting them. Detective Walsh, who had become Emma's primary liaison during the investigation, leaned forward. What kind of protector grown-ups? Teachers who knew which kids were sad, doctors who knew which kids had been hurt, and police officers who knew which families had problems, Emma recited, as if repeating a lesson she'd been taught. She said it was easier to make friends with the helpers than to sneak around them. The computer specialist working on the encrypted files suddenly looked up from his screen. "Agent Chen, you need to see this. We've broken through another layer of encryption." On the monitor appeared a spreadsheet that made everyone in the room fall silent. It contained hundreds of names organized by profession and location. Elementary school counselors in Ohio, pediatric nurses in Michigan, family court mediators in Pennsylvania, and social workers across 7 different states. Each name was followed by detailed notes about their recruitment, their level of cooperation, and most chillingly, their productivity ratings, based on how many vulnerable children they had identified for the network. "This can't be real," Detective Walsh whispered, scanning the list. "Some of these people are pillars of their communities." Agent Chen's expression was grim. The perfect cover. Who would suspect a beloved teacher or a trusted doctor of facilitating child exploitation? Emma had stopped coloring and was watching the adults with the serious expression that had become familiar during the investigation. The teacher lady said good people were the easiest to trick because they wanted to believe they were helping. How did she trick them? Agent Chen asked. She told them she was doing research to help traumatized kids get better faster. She said the kids she picked needed special attention, and she would pay the grown-ups for helping identify children who could benefit from her programs. The manipulation was sophisticated and perfectly designed to prey on the genuine desire of child welfare professionals to help vulnerable kids. By framing their recruitment as beneficial research, Dr. Hawkins had turned the very people meant to protect children into unwitting accomplices. Rex suddenly lifted his head, his ears perked with attention. Kate noticed immediately and looked around the secure facility, wondering what had triggered her partner's alert.
"What is it, Rex?" Kate asked. But before anyone could respond, Agent Chen's secure phone rang.
The conversation was brief but intense, and when Agent Chen hung up, her face was pale. "We have a problem. 3 people on this list have disappeared in the past 24 hours. Dr. Amanda Torres from Chicago Children's Hospital, Michael Brett from Denver Social Services, and Sarah Kim, a school counselor in Portland." Emma looked up from her coloring book. "They're running away because they know we found the list." "It's more than that," Agent Chen replied, studying the computer screen. "According to this data, those 3 were among the highest-rated recruiters. If they've gone underground with their knowledge of vulnerable children." The implication was terrifying. The network's most effective recruiters were now on the run with detailed information about hundreds of at-risk children and intimate knowledge of how child protection systems worked. Detective Walsh began coordinating with local law enforcement in all 3 cities, while Agent Chen worked with the cybercrime unit to track any digital footprints the missing recruiters might have left behind. But it was Emma who provided the breakthrough that would crack the case wide open. "Agent Chen," Emma said quietly, still focused on her coloring, "the teacher lady told me that when good helpers got scared and wanted to quit, they had to go to the punishment place."
"Punishment place?" Agent Chen asked, sitting down next to Emma.
"A special house where helpers who knew too much had to stay until they remembered how to keep secrets again. She said it was like a timeout for grown-ups who forgot the rules." Agent Chen felt her pulse quicken. "Emma, did Dr. Hawkins ever tell you where this punishment place was?" Emma nodded, still coloring, but speaking with the matter-of-fact tone of a child recounting a bedtime story. "She said it was in the mountains, where it's hard for people to hear you scream, and it had special rooms for making movies that were even more secret than the regular movies." The computer specialist suddenly called out urgently, "Agent Chen, I'm finding references to something called Sanctuary in these encrypted files. It appears to be a physical location with coordinates." Within minutes, satellite imagery revealed a remote compound in the Colorado Rockies, accessible only by a single mountain road and surrounded by dense forest. The compound appeared to consist of multiple buildings, including what looked like residential quarters and a larger structure that could house sophisticated equipment. "That's where they take the helpers who want to quit," Emma said, looking at the satellite image on the screen. "And that's where they make the really bad movies with grown-ups and kids together." Agent Chen immediately began coordinating with federal tactical teams, while Detective Walsh worked with local Colorado authorities. But Rex had other ideas. The German Shepherd suddenly stood up and moved to the window, his body tense and alert. Kate joined him, trying to understand what had triggered his protective instincts in a secure federal facility. "Rex is detecting something," Kate announced. "Electronic surveillance equipment, but it's close, very close." Emma set down her crayon and looked directly at Agent Chen. The teacher lady said they had friends everywhere, even in the police buildings. She said they always knew when the good police were getting too close to their secrets. The realization hit Agent Chen like a physical blow. If the network had managed to infiltrate federal facilities, then their entire investigation could be compromised. Every move they made, every plan they formed, could be transmitted directly to the people they were trying to catch. "Full facility lockdown," Agent Chen ordered. "Sweep every room for surveillance devices." But Emma was already moving toward the door, with Rex immediately falling into step beside her. "The signal is coming from upstairs," she said with the confidence of someone who had learned to recognize the electronic signatures that Rex detected. "Emma, you can't," Detective Walsh started to protest. "Rex knows where the bad electronics are," Emma interrupted, "and I know what they sound like. The teacher lady taught me to listen for the little beeps and buzzes that meant someone was watching." Against all protocols but trusting the instincts that had saved multiple children's lives, Agent Chen made a decision that would either expose the leak in their security or endanger a 6-year-old girl who had already risked everything to help them. Kate, you and Rex take point. Emma, you stay behind them and tell us what you're detecting. They move through the secure facility with Rex leading the way, his nose working overtime to track the electronic scent that had triggered his alert. Emma walked beside Kate, her small hand resting on Rex's collar, as she listened for the sounds that Dr. Hawkins had taught her to recognize. On the 3rd floor, Rex stopped outside an office door marked Communications Specialist, David Chen. The nameplate made Agent Chen stop in her tracks. "That's my brother," she whispered. "He's worked federal cybersecurity for 8 years." Emma pressed her ear to the door, then looked up at the adults. There are lots of beeps in there, but also the special sound that means someone is talking to the outside. When they opened the door, they found David Chen at his computer, frantically deleting files while speaking into a headset in a voice they'd never heard him use before. "Sanctuary has been compromised," he was saying. "Initiate the dispersal protocol immediately. Move all assets to secondary locations." The man who had been Agent Sarah Chen's trusted brother, who had attended family dinners and birthday parties, who had played with Emma during breaks in her interviews, was the leak that had been feeding information to the predatory network. Rex positioned himself between David and the door, while Agent Chen drew her weapon, her hands shaking with a combination of professional training and personal betrayal. "David, step away from the computer and remove the headset." David Chen turned around slowly, his face showing no surprise, only resignation. "Hello, Sarah. I was wondering when you'd figure it out." "How long?" Agent Chen asked, her voice barely steady. 3 years. Ever since Patricia recruited me through what I thought was a legitimate research partnership." David's voice carried no remorse, only the flat tone of someone who had made peace with his choices long ago. "They offered me financial security and convinced me I was helping develop better ways to identify children who needed intervention." Emma stepped forward, still holding Rex's collar. "You were listening when I told the secrets about my daddy's work friends, weren't you?" David nodded. "Everything you said, everything this investigation uncovered, was transmitted to our partners within minutes." The full scope of the betrayal became clear. Every breakthrough in their investigation, every name they'd identified, every child they'd attempted to protect, all of it had been immediately communicated to the very people they were trying to stop. "The compound in Colorado," Agent Chen realized. "You warned them we were coming." "The sanctuary has been abandoned for 6 hours," David confirmed. "But don't worry. They've had contingency plans in place for years. The work will continue from locations you'll never find." Emma looked up at Agent Chen with the serious expression that had become her trademark during the investigation. "He's lying about some things and telling the truth about others." "What do you mean, Emma?" "He's telling the truth that they moved away from the mountain place, but he's lying about them being gone forever. The teacher lady always said that the most important rule was to never abandon the kids they were already working with." David's confident expression flickered for just a moment, and Emma caught it immediately. "You know where they took the kids they already had, don't you?" Emma pressed. "The teacher lady told you to help them move the special kids to a safe place." Rex had been watching David throughout the conversation, and now the German Shepherd stepped closer, his training telling him that this man represented a threat to the children he was sworn to protect. "The dispersal protocol," Agent Chen said, understanding Emma's insight. "You didn't just warn them we were coming, you helped coordinate moving their existing victims to secure locations." David's silence was answer enough. Emma walked closer to David's computer, with Rex maintaining protective distance beside her. "The teacher lady taught me that computers remember everything, even when people try to make them forget." She was right. Despite David's frantic deletion attempts, the computer forensics team would later recover communication logs, location data, and most importantly, real-time coordinates for vehicles that had left the Colorado compound in the hours before the federal raid. But Emma wasn't finished. "Mr. David, the teacher lady also taught me that people who help hurt kids always get hurt themselves eventually. She said it was one of the rules that never changed." David looked at the 6-year-old who had brought down his entire network, and for the first time since his arrest, his composure cracked. "You don't understand what you've done, little girl. This was bigger than you can imagine. And now dozens of children who were being protected in our programs are going to be lost in the system." "Protected?" Detective Walsh stepped forward, her voice sharp with anger. You call what you were doing protection? We were documenting abuse, studying trauma responses, developing better therapeutic interventions, David replied, but his words sounded hollow even to himself. Emma shook her head. You were hurting kids and calling it research, just like the teacher lady did. But Rex knew you were bad people from the very beginning. As if responding to his name, Rex moved closer to Emma, his presence a reminder that throughout this entire ordeal, the German Shepherd's instincts had been consistently correct about every threat they'd encountered. The arrest of David Chen led to the recovery of real-time tracking data that allowed federal agents to intercept 3 vehicles carrying rescued children to secondary locations. Within 48 hours, all 6 children who had been moved from the Colorado compound were safely recovered and reunited with legitimate child protective services. Dr. Patricia Hawkins, Thomas Reed, and 23 other members of their network were arrested across 7 states. The 3 missing recruiters were found at the abandoned Colorado compound, victims of the network's own paranoia about loose ends. But perhaps the most important outcome of the investigation was the development of new protocols for identifying and preventing the infiltration of child protection systems by predatory networks. Emma's insights into the psychological manipulation techniques used by recruiters led to mandatory training programs for professionals working with vulnerable children. Rex's detection abilities inspired the development of specialized canine units trained to identify electronic surveillance equipment in sensitive environments. 6 months after that Tuesday afternoon in the courthouse corridor, Emma Chen sat on the front porch of her new home, watching Rex play fetch with a tennis ball in their fenced backyard. Sarah had quit her job at the hospital and relocated them to a small town where Emma could attend school without the constant reminder of what she'd endured. The 6-year-old who had helped bring down a nationwide predatory network was learning to be a kid again, though she would always carry the wisdom that came from understanding evil far too early in life. Rex bounded up to the porch with his tennis ball, his tail wagging with the simple joy of a dog who had done his job and protected the innocent. Emma scratched behind his ears and whispered something that would stay between them forever. Thank you for teaching me that some grown-ups lie, but good dogs always tell the truth. As the sun set behind the mountains that surrounded their new home, Emma picked up the drawing she'd been working on, a picture of Rex with angel wings, just like the one she'd given to Kate months earlier. But this one was different. This one showed Rex surrounded by dozens of children, all safe, all protected, all free from the shadows that had once threatened to consume them. In the corner of the drawing, in her careful 6-year-old handwriting, Emma had written, "Rex doesn't bark for fun. He barks for the kids who can't." The German Shepherd, who had been trained to detect human evil, had become something more, a guardian angel in fur, a protector of innocence, a reminder that sometimes the most important heroes are the ones who never seek recognition for their service. Emma folded the drawing carefully and tucked it into her backpack for school the next day. She had decided to give it to her new teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had kind eyes and had never asked Emma to keep any secrets. As they headed inside for dinner, Rex took one last look around their peaceful neighborhood, his amber eyes alert and protective. His work was never truly finished. There would always be children who needed protecting, always be evil that required stopping. But for tonight, the little girl who smelled like strawberry shampoo and courage was safe, and that was enough. If you've made it this far, you've witnessed one of the most incredible stories of bravery from both a child and her 4-legged guardian. Drop a comment about which moment shocked you the most. Hit that like button if Rex deserves a hero's recognition. Share this story to spread awareness about protecting our children. And subscribe for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in the power of courage and love.